guys, thanks for tuning in. I'm Reed Coverdale, and you're watching The Naturalist Capitalist. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about Rand Paul. He's someone that I like, and a lot of people who follow me like. So, I want to talk a little bit about what I like about him, what I don't like about him, why I supported him, and why I still would say that I support him now, and why I would still vote for him for president. Um, so I first became interested in him in 2014, probably. Um, I was in high school when his dad, Ron Paul, was running, and I wasn't paying too close attention to politics at that time, but I remember that I did really like what he was saying about war and spending. Um, and then uh, listening to Rand Paul in like 2013, 2014, I realized that he was different than all the other Republicans, or most of them. And what was different about him was he really believed in what he was saying. He believed in small government, he believed in responsible spending, he believed in staying out of other people's affairs. One thing he was really big on was the war in Syria and how we shouldn't be arming the so-called rebels because all those weapons that we were giving were really ending up in the hands of Al Qaeda and ISIS. Um, and he talked about how the Iraq War had been a mistake and how none of the wars we were in were really making us safer. Um, and so I really started listening to him on those fronts, on war and on spending. Um, but listening to him more in depth, he actually brought me into the criminal justice reform camp of the Libertarian Party, really. He really exposed how the system we have hurts people at the bottom and makes it impossible for them to get anywhere. And I started seeing that to some extent in my own life in 2014 and 2015. Not that I couldn't get ahead, but I saw it in people's lives around me. I worked in Denver for a roofing company, and there were a lot of people who were trying to put their past behind them. And I just listening to their stories, I realized that the system we had did not make it easy to succeed. Was it made it easier to just fall back into prison. Um, so I really agreed with him on that front, and then immigration as well. He took a very different stance from most Republicans. He wanted immigration reform that would work, that would allow people who want to come here to work to come here legally and work, to get rid of the bureaucracy that just made it so hard. Um, and so I was really impressed with his message. Um, and then 2015, when he announced, I was fully behind him. Um, Especially when you saw all the other candidates roll out. Mike Huckabee, Jeb Bush, Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, Chris Christie, Ben Carson. I mean, they were all just terrible. And he really had that outsider message of being for criminal justice reform, border policy reform, foreign policy reform, and spending reform. Um, the rest of them, it was really lip service when it came to spending. I thought when it came to immigration, there were like Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio weren't bad, but then had like Donald Trump and Ted Cruz and a lot of them they just had terrible terrible ideas. And then Marco Rubio's ideas, even though I liked the sentiment, it almost just added more bureaucracy to make it harder for immigration to reform. Um, and watching the debates, Rand was the only one on the whole stage who had any common sense. I mean, when it came to surveillance and terror and just anything, like he was the only one who I really thought believed what he was saying. Unfortunately, he didn't have the fire that his dad did. And I think he also tried to pander a little bit too much to the right wing, where he should have really just gone for the libertarian leaning Republicans and the libertarians. I understand what he was trying to do, but I don't think it really worked, obviously, because he didn't get too much support. When he first jumped in the ring, everyone he had a lot of momentum behind him, but then kind of dwindled out. And I just don't think he conveyed his message correctly. Anyone who was really paying attention to him, like I was, realized that what he was saying was the truth and that he was the guy to vote for. But the media actually spun him as a racist, which was hilarious because he had the by far the best criminal justice record, and he talked all the time about how the war on drugs has had a racially disparate outcome, how we needed to invest in our communities that were poor and had people of color. Like, I mean, no one else was talking like he was, and the media was still able to spin him as a racist, which was absolutely insane. Um, and he just got delegitimized by the party in the debates. Like, he got the most ridicule for wanting to legalize marijuana, for wanting to overturn the Patriot Act. He got into a few heated discussions with Chris Christie, Marco Rubio, Donald Trump, on free speech and civil liberties, and it was just crazy to watch. So obviously he didn't win, which was really disappointing. He actually dropped out after Iowa, and I lived in New Hampshire, so I didn't even get to vote for him. But he after he dropped out, he continued his message, and he didn't endorse anyone until pretty much right before the convention, and it was a very, very tepid endorsement of Donald Trump. And it was based on foreign policy, because even though Donald Trump was not anti war, he was not Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz was saying, we're going to bomb the Middle East until sand glows in the dark. And, he was just terrible. So it was a very tepid endorsement. He didn't campaign for him at all. And I even remember him saying, maybe this is the year for Liberty Republicans to vote third party. So he was in no way sheep herding his followers into voting for Trump. I'd say he did a better job at it than Tulsi did with Biden. And I don't think Tulsi has been sheep herding us to vote for Biden either. But she endorsed Biden when Bernie was still a pretty decent player in the race. And Bernie is obviously the one who's anti war. And she refuses to attack Biden on anything. Where Rand, when he endorsed Trump, he still openly disagreed with him on a lot of stuff. And when Trump started naming who his appointees were going to be, Rand was like, okay, I'm going to block this guy. I'm going to oppose this guy. This guy's terrible. This is bad. I don't really see Tulsi doing that. If Biden wins and she starts acting differently, I'll, kudos to her. But Rand, even though he supported Trump, his policies didn't change at all. And the first couple of years, he was actually like vocally in opposition to Trump a lot. And then he's kind of toned down in the last year and a half or so, and he's vocally supportive of Trump. But if you watch all of his speeches, all of his votes, they really haven't changed. So as much as I hate to see him campaign for Trump or support Trump because they don't have really anything in common, I do realize that Rand has stayed the same person and that he is still pushing for the same reforms. And the way that he thinks he can do that best is by having Donald Trump's ear instead of ostracizing him, instead of ostracizing himself by being an open critic and therefore not having any input at all. I think that Rand has actually made some substantial differences with Trump. I think if Rand were not in that sort of inner circle, that we probably would have gone to war with Iran. We probably, wouldn't have had some of the criminal justice bills signed that have been signed. I think Rand has made a positive difference while he's in there. Um, it's important to note that Rand is a Republican. He's not a libertarian, and he's never said he's a libertarian. He has said he's libertarian ish, and he's even said his dad is more libertarian than he is. He's a Republican. Um, so he's not lying to us. He's told us who he is. I think he is a very good Republican. I would say the best Republican. Thomas Massey is right up there with him. What I really like about Rand the most is that he commits political suicide to stand for his principles over extremely controversial bills. And they're, he gets eviscerated on it. He gets called all sorts of names on both sides of the aisle, but he does it. He'll block a bill that raises spending without an amendment. And the small-minded people will attack him on it. So, for example, I think a couple things come to mind. One is the 9/11 responders bill a couple years ago or a year ago or whatever that was. He was for the bill. He simply had an amendment that took the spending that the bill would use out of a different area of the budget. And people wouldn't vote for his amendment. So he blocked the bill. So what do all the news outlets say? They say Rand Paul is against helping 9/11 first responders, which is complete bullshit. I mean, you can watch the videos of him on the Senate floor. You can look it up. He had an amendment that would offset the spending. And no, that's been his thing forever. Another one is this anti-lynching bill that this is going on right now. The anti-lynching bill does not make lynching a federal hate crime. It already is. So this is really just a political gesture for the current times. And he's even said, I will pass this bill. Like we can have unanimous consent to pass this bill today if we just pass this amendment that makes it explicitly clear that lynching only applies to lynching, that it doesn't extend to any other sort of crimes. Because he's big on criminal justice reform, so he doesn't want the death penalty expanded. He's against the death penalty. He doesn't want mandatory minimums expanded. So he wants it to be unequivocally defined as lynching and nothing else. And, you look at the headlines right now, he's getting butchered for that. So I really admire him for being willing to just completely sacrifice his political image for things like that. What I don't like about him is he's said it to us before that he's a Republican. He is a Republican. He's not his dad. His dad is, I'd say, a libertarian first, a Republican second. Rand is definitely a Republican first, a libertarian second. And some things that he's voted for, I'm not a fan of. I'm not a fan of the tax cuts because we didn't cut spending, and I think it was obvious we wouldn't cut spending. If I know Rand always, votes for less spending, and that's in his mind. It's fewer taxes, lower spending. But you got to be pragmatic. If you are not going to be able to cut spending, you can't cut taxes. That's the worst thing you can do. So I disagreed with him on that. I disagreed with him on Mike Pompeo, and I don't really know what happened there because he was threatening to block his nomination, and then that conversation happened right before Mike Pompeo got appointed, and then Rand kind of flipped on it. So I really don't know what happened there. He might have gotten paid off. I don't know. If he did, that sucks. But the fact is he's remained extremely consistent on every bill that comes through, every speech he does on the Senate floor. He's openly opposed Donald Trump and Mike Pompeo all the time when it comes to foreign policy. He votes against the Republican Party 30% of the time. So Rand Paul is not my perfect politician, but he, in my opinion, is the best Republican. I think he's been able to influence a lot of change that someone like Justin Amash isn't able to. Justin Amash, even though if I would probably act more like Justin Amash if I were in Congress, but um, there's no way Justin Amash is going to have any influence on the Democrats or the Republicans, where Rand does have that impact. So Rand is a politician. He's a better politician than his dad was, which sucks in a lot of ways because I really like people who just say it how it is. Um, but he does what he has to do to get the reforms in, and I can understand that. On this channel, I actually made a video called Ron, Rand, Tulsi, and it briefly shows Ron Paul in the beginning, but then it really goes into Rand Paul's campaign and why I supported him, and then it covers Tulsi's campaign and why I supported her. And if you watch it, you'll realize how remarkably similar their campaigns were, but also their policies in a lot of areas. Um, so if Rand Paul runs in 2024 as a Republican, I'm a little split because I'm so disenfranchised with the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. I just feel like it's a waste of time getting involved in the primaries, and I'm considering just going straight to the Libertarian primary and just having my voice heard there. If Rand Paul can actually win the Republican nomination without being a complete sellout, and he's running against pretty much anyone on the Democrat side, if I don't feel like the Libertarians can win, I would probably vote for him. Because, as I said, even though I don't agree with him on everything, I think he's remained incredibly principled regardless of his supportive rhetoric of the president. I think he is the same man, and I think people who hate him, who used to like him, who think he's just sold out, I think they need to look deeper. They need to read deeper than the headlines. They need to read the bills that he's voting on. They need to go in depth as to what he's doing in Congress. And in my mind, he hasn't changed at all. So, yeah, that's what I think about Rand Paul. The biggest interest I have right now is if he's going to run for re-election in 2 years, because something he ran on was term limits. So this will be 2 turns, and I'm interested to see if he just calls it quits there and then runs for president, or what he does. But either way, I think we're blessed to have Rand Paul in the Senate. And he's definitely my favorite senator, probably my favorite legislator, probably my favorite Republican out there. So there you have it. Comment below on what you guys think of him. All right, I'll catch you guys next time.